Hello, and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Triggett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus, we're going to talk about no walls and no limits, how to build, market, and hire for a mobile rehabilitation practice with Covell Care and Rehabilitation. We're going to be talking with Krista Covell, and she's the founder and CEO of Covell Care and Rehabilitation, 70 therapists, mobile and outpatient practice in Colorado. And she's going to share with us how she's achieved such great growth at Covell Care, including how she manages her growing team, markets mobile PT, OT, and speech, and hires across Colorado. So Krista, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Awesome. Well, you have a great story here. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your story of how you started with Covell Care and then how it's grown over the years?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm an occupational therapist actually by trade. And so when I was going to OT school many moons ago, this is when the prospective payment system came into place. So for anybody that's listening to this that actually remembers those days, that was a really tough time for a brand new therapist to enter the field because a lot of therapists with experience were losing their jobs. And here I was, new kid on the block, and I was living in a college town that has an OT school, Colorado State University. So we had a ton of OTs coming into the field. We had too many OTs that had lost their jobs, and there just wasn't a place to work for me. So I also have a degree in social work. So I started working as a social worker first. And what happened over time is I was working as a social worker in a SNF, and then the rehab manager, our company had been bought out. And the rehab manager had decided to, after 10 years, go do something else. And I thought, oh, that's great. She was an OT. And I thought, I'll be the staff OT. They'll hire the PT as the manager, and that'll be great. Well, they put me in the management position. And so it was kind of like sink or swim, way over my head. I had no idea what I was doing in that management position. But when I look back on that, I'm so thankful that I had that social work piece first because it really gave me good insight into the community that I was sending patients out into through rehab. And then as the manager, not having a ton of experience, I also feel lucky because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I just was like, oh, we could do it like this, or we could do it like this, or we could paint the gym, or we could do this. And we did all these different things that were kind of out of the box. And the medical director that I was working with at the time, he said, maybe you should start your own business. And I really had a love for people that had cognitive impairments and dementia. And at that time, when we would discharge them home, there weren't a lot of services for them available. And it really didn't make sense for somebody with, moderate stages of dementia to come into an outpatient clinic and expect there to be much carryover, plus the caregiver burnout and all of that. But I remember looking at him, and his name's Dr. Birmingham, but I looked at him and I thought, start my own business. What are you talking about? Like, I'm gonna work here forever. Like, I love my job. Of course, famous last words. Bounced around a little bit, did few different management positions, and then I worked with a neuropsychologist who had a great appreciation for OT and understood that when she was doing her assessments, when I would do a functional capacity assessment at home, that it would sometimes be very different than her pen and paper type tests. And so she asked me to come on and be an independent contractor with her. So we had a very narrow scope of patients that we saw, very niche down business, which was great. But then over time, I started getting more calls from lots of different people like, hey, my neighbor doesn't have any family and we're kind of worried about her. And she said she let you come over and do an assessment with her. So I just went out on my own, not really knowing what that was going to turn into, and worked full time for a long time. Did a lot of home safety assessments, functional capacity assessments, got people DME, just helped them stay home. And it really made a lot of sense as an OT because I was always using the environment as part of my treatment regime. And so then when I was like, well, what am I going to do? I was working in another SNF, and again, they had been bought out, but they told me, the new company, we're going to bring you in because the SNF staff really loves you, but we're going to replace you with a COTA, a COTA, when we get the contract. And I thought, well, first of all, why would you tell me that? And second of all, I'm like, oh no, like I'm really just a number in the
Mhm.
staff. And I had a mortgage to pay. I was single. I was like, I can't lose my job. So that was really a paradigm shift for me when I started to put Covell Care first in my mind
Mhm.
and my job as my second. So I still did all my duties there, but I started flexing my hours so I could see more patients. Went to my corporate boss, and they were very kind to me when I thought they would be like, you can't really be doing all this. And they said, this is obviously your passion. We're going to respect that. And whatever you need to do with your schedule is fine with us. So eventually I just went from full time to 30 hours to 20 hours to PRN and left. So, and then over time we added physical therapy, speech therapy, pelvic health. We did driving rehab for a while, and then fitness training at home too. So it just sort of mushroomed and took on a mind of its own, and I just followed the breadcrumbs. I never really knew where this was going. Sometimes I still don't.
That's an awesome story. And I hear a lot of similar stories where, we have to earn the money to pay our mortgage and feed our
Hmm.
families, right? So, but we want to take that entrepreneurial leap
Yeah.
and start our own practice. And there's that in between where you need to keep working your job, right, to bring the
Hmm.
money in while you're still getting this thing rolling. And but there comes that point where it's like, okay, do I go all in on this thing or do I
Yeah.
pull back from this thing? And so it's really that leap of faith, right? Just going all in on the practice,
Hmm.
to make it go where it needs to go. And that's just exciting to hear your story there of growth. And so I'm curious, did you start mobile, or
Hmm.
did you start like in a facility and then decided to add mobile?
Nope. I've always been mobile, and really it came from truly having a passion, like I said, for people that had cognitive impairments, and I needed to see them where they lived, worked, played.
Hmm.
So, for example, I had a client that was working at the university, had fallen, had a brain injury, and I could only simulate so much even in her home that I would go to work with her and we would do
Mm.
some stuff there. I'd go to meetings with her and I'd be looking at the lighting and understanding like why she would have this screaming headache after meetings. And so I've always been mobile and just wanted, we know too that when people are involved in their community, they do better. And so I wanted to be that link in the chain that not only could see them in the home, but also, can you get to your bank? Can you pay your mortgage? Can you pay your rent? Can you go grocery shopping with your oxygen and your walker,
Mhm.
and not be completely wiped at the end of the day? So I always took that as a really big influence over the care that I was providing. And it's funny because I've had people say, "Well, how'd you come up with that?" And I'm like, "I didn't. It's called occupational therapy. Like that's what we do."
Right.
And so it never worked for me. I'd worked in outpatient, and there's benefits to that for sure, just like in a
Mhm.
brick and mortar. For certain clients, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
And so, always been mobile. All of our therapists are mobile.
That's it. And there's such a huge need for it.
Hmm.
And it's just a growing need too
Yeah.
as our population ages, and there is such a benefit to there's obviously times where there's a benefit of going to a practice, and then
Of
there's
course.
times where it's really useful to be in the person's home,
Hmm.
to help them, especially through care
Hmm.
and you know rehabilitating to live
Yeah.
more independently. So that's a big part of what we do as therapists, right?
Yep.
To help our patients become more independent.
Hmm.
So I think it's such a huge opportunity for practices to
Hmm.
consider adding some mobile capabilities. I've seen that happen quite a few times where you start out with an outpatient clinic and then you realize, hey, I have a good friend in New York City that had a couple of different outpatient facilities and then started to do home care, and that just exploded.
Yeah.
And so he's at the point where I think he has like 50 something therapists just in New York City doing mobile.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to help the public
Hmm.
out there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious in terms of for 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 you, and your practice's approach. Is there anything particular that you like to address or like to really focus on by treating the patients at home, like the opportunities there?
Yeah, it really depends on what's going on because we get such a mixed bag of clientele.
Hmm.
I think that's also very interesting in the mobile space. So, for example, I'm working with some women that are survivors of sex trafficking, and
Wow.
so they're they're amazing women, but they have been through very intense trauma.
Hmm.
They are trying to get some life skills in place so that they can take care of themselves and move beyond that. And then I can pivot to, I have a client who's in her early 80s who just got diagnosed with Parkinson's and is newly living on her own because her spouse of 60 plus years has passed away. So we just really try to walk in, and I always try to think about it like when I walk over that threshold into the house, I have to let everything go of my own baggage, but also like what I think something's going to look like because the
Hmm.
way people live is so different, just house to house to house.
Yeah.
So really, it's just being that very patient focused. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time to unpack everything because when you're really dealing with like the full life picture, there's a lot to manage, from everything from transportation to, being able to not fall in the bathroom. I mean, it's all over the map. So it really has to be pretty patient centered in a way that when I've worked in more traditional settings, you still be client centered, but a lot of it can be very simulated or
Hmm.
there's some guesswork there. And for us, we're just like in it at the house or in the community. So I think that's the biggest difference is really taking into account the whole picture of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's wow. That's some incredible stories there. And I've done home care, so I know what
Hmm.
it's like. Like it's very different. Like you said, everybody's house is different. Every way that people living is totally different, right? And you have
Right.
to be able to think and adapt on your feet to what you
Hmm.
need to approach it with. Is that something that you help your therapist train for? To kind of think differently like that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Everybody comes to the table with a little bit of different understanding and experience. And I used to always say somebody that works at Covell has to have 5 years of experience. And then after working with a lot of CSU students and students from other universities, I was like, this is actually the perfect therapist to go in because they don't have all these different influences from other positions. So some folks really need a lot of guidance, but some don't. And then we've offered like mentorship or coaching through Covell just to really give people some confidence and ideas. Because again, when you walk into the house, it is so different because you're the only one there. Sometimes it's a crazy place. And so
Mhm.
you want to be able to manage and mitigate all that and then also stay in your lane. So we also have a client care coordinator that if it's like, oh my gosh, like this family needs a lot of support, I'm in over my head, I don't know what to do, that client care coordinator can come in and really kind of assist with some of those pieces that goes beyond the traditional role of PTOT and speech.
Yeah, totally. I could definitely relate to that. I remember times where I had to go treat patients in Overtown in Miami, and that was quite an adventure.
Yeah, there's times
Uh,
I walk in, I'm like, oh, this is new. Like,
yeah,
I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I'm going to figure it out.
awesome. And so, how many therapists have you built up to now?
We're at about 70. And
Wow.
so, but keep in mind too that when I say 70, some of them see patients every day. Some of them
Hmm.
just see patients here and there. We have
Yeah.
therapists that come to us that work in the school system and they just want to work on breaks or during the summer. So, it sounds like a big number, but it really just, we want to create a space where therapists feel like it works for them and
Hmm.
then we make it work for us because there's so many clients that need help that whatever support we can get with good quality therapists, we want to provide that. And we want to keep the therapists happy too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is key, right? We want to make sure
Yeah.
that they can be successful in their job, that they
Hmm.
feel fulfillment. It helps the patients do better when you have a happy therapist, right? It helps the business because you have
Absolutely.
retention.
Hmm.
So, yeah, an investment in your team is really critical.
Hmm.
I'm curious, what has the evolution of Covell Care looked like as you've added more therapists over time? Like, how's that management changed? And just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, there's highs and lows with it. Probably the biggest challenge I have now that when I look back that I think was is something I miss is because we're all so spread out. It's really hard to get everybody together. So, and then we're mobile. So it's not like we're walking through the office being like, oh, hey, I saw Sally today. I heard you saw her yesterday. We don't have that, like those touch points. And I really miss that. And so that has been a more of a challenge. So we've had to come up with some creative ways to get that connection. So that's been a fun challenge, but a challenge nonetheless. So I've kind of missed that. But it's also very rewarding to know that there's a client in Colorado Springs that's going to get the exact right wheelchair that I am 3 hours from that I can't help. And we have therapists out there doing that work. And so that is just, it's great to see things expanding and more people getting help that they need, that they wouldn't have otherwise, which is great.
Hmm. And so what does it look like with 70 therapists? Like how many managers do you have, directors? Just kind of curious what that looks like.
Yeah, so we have an admin team where we try to offload the therapist as much as we can with the administrative part of care, which we all know is a headache, and we can't get away from our documentation and stuff. But so we have our director of business development, which is Haley, who you've communicated with, and she does a lot of recruitment, retention, onboarding, compliance, that kind of thing, human resources type stuff. Then we have our director of business operations, and she oversees all of our billing. And so she's been with me for 16 years, I think, a long time, and Haley 12, maybe 13, I can't remember, but yeah, so they're really an integral part of Covell's operations. And then we have an intake team of two, and then we have a billing assistant, our client care coordinator, and then we have a compliance coordinator as well, and that's an occupational therapist. So
Yeah.
we try to give the therapists and the clinicians as much support as we can on that admin side. And also, no question is, pushed away. We try to be accessible. And then also we can step in on a clinical side of things or just, hey, let's do some training on your documentation. We need to up this a little bit, stop doing this, blah, blah, blah. So we try to be very hands-on, but also give them a lot of autonomy with their schedule and the type of clients that they want to see because again, that retention piece is huge. And so if somebody wants a whole caseload of pelvic health, we're going to try to develop that for that therapist.
Gotcha. So the scheduling part becomes a little bit more on the therapist versus like just a front desk.
Yeah, the therapists do all their own scheduling. When we've asked the therapists what their favorite part about working at Covell is, it's the flexibility.
Nice.
Because they can work as much or as little as they want. They can drive as far or as little as they want. So, but that's how I want to work as an OT, and I still see a lot of patients. And so I want to be able to manage my schedule around not only what works for my patients, but for me too.
Top 10% of PT owners aren't just surviving, they're thriving. But what's their secret? Well, Neil Trickett's new Market to Grow book reveals how the top 10% of PT practices leverage marketing systems to simultaneously grow their new patients, attract top talent, and boost profit in their practice. You can learn from their secrets. Visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free copy of Market to Grow. Yes, you heard that right. We are shipping a free copy of Market to Grow to all podcast listeners who want it. Just visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free book. And now back to the show.
Yeah, so that's something that is different about mobile versus being an outpatient in the clinic, right? Is
Sure.
that I do like that flexibility, and I do think it becomes really vital for the therapist to be able to own their own schedules because they want to optimize it for driving, they want to optimize it for they know they need a little extra time with this patient versus that patient, and
Yeah.
maybe they got to go pick up their kids or something like that. So that's one of the benefits of mobile. But I think that if you were to put a mobile part of treatment into your outpatient clinic, for example, that's something that's going to be different, right? The scheduling might be a little bit different than what you're traditionally used to from an outpatient standpoint. So I'm curious for you, as you've grown and put these awesome key people into place, what has that looked like for you as a leader, right? As an owner?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it without them. They're like my work family, and the funny thing, so our director of business operations, her name is Cassandra, and the funny thing is that she was a CNA when I was working in rehab. And so we worked together side by side all the time, and I thought she was in high school. She just looks really young, and she wasn't. And she came to work one day with wedding pictures, and I was like, wow, like, how old is that girl? And she just got married. She's just so young. Well, she was a lot older than I thought she was. But she just always was such a hard worker, and she talked about how she wanted to do something other than be a CNA. And we worked really great together. We laughed all the time. We loved taking care of patients. And eventually I asked her to come and work for me part-time and then eventually full-time. And that was a big jump. But it was just about selecting people that I really respected a lot and then looked up to in different ways because they had skill sets that I don't. And we've just sort of done life together. And that's where I look at it, even with the therapists and that flexibility and stuff. I'm like, if we're in the business of really trying to help people have the most functional, satisfying, safest, most independent life, then we should also be putting those things into place in our own lives. And these are folks, everybody on my team, that we all really value that together, and so we support one another, and they allow me to take vacations or to step away. And I appreciate that, and that is really helpful for me as a leader to be able to have people I know I trust 100% to have my back, to protect the business, protect the patients, and do the right thing, just have a strong moral compass.
Yeah, it's so critical. And I'm curious, just kind of looking back at your own journey. This is something that I see quite often in business in general, right? But especially in practice, is that there's that point where you're growing, and you become the bottleneck, and you have to get those key people in place, right? And it's about letting go to trust them. Was there a point in your career when that evolution happened for you?
Yes and no. I still can be the bottleneck. I don't know. That's a me thing, I think, a problem that a lot of business owners have, I know. But yeah, for me, I didn't have children until I was in my 40s. And so when I was at my first kids, I had twins. And so that was like mind blowing. And then you're a business owner too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, drinking from a fire hose with twins. And then a few years later, I had another baby. So then when I had that third boy, that was when I went to my two directors and said, listen, like I'm being forced to step away because my family needs me. And that was a big deal for me. And there were growing pains in that, and good and bad. So, but I know when I need to, I can let go. And then I also know that that's something that I need to continue to cultivate in myself because I'm not the best about that.
I think we're all working on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always a work in progress.
Right.
Awesome. So let's kind of shift gears here a little bit towards marketing. So obviously you've grown the business, you have much more territory, you have much more therapists that are working for you. So what have you found to be successful for you in terms of marketing to help you get new patients into the service?
A couple different things. Number one is probably just our relationships with people, which you hear all the time. It's just doing what you say what, if you say you're going to do something, do it, and build that trust and reputation as an individual, me, and then my team. And so if you say you're going to deliver. And if you can't, and that happens, then just be honest, and be yourself and develop good relationships and support other businesses too. And I think a big part of that, I've met some therapists along the way that are very resistant to collaboration because there's that threat of like, oh, you're our competition. And I've always chosen to think there's more than enough work for all of us, and there very much is. So I'd rather embrace who my competition is and work together and collaborate in different ways because you never know what that's going to turn into. So I think the relationship piece is huge. And then also just closing the loop with communication. So if you have a patient, close the loop with their doctors, with their family members, go that extra mile with communication, because in our healthcare settings, of course, communication's so fractured. Nobody talks to each other. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So if we can bring that bridge together, even though it's extra effort, I think that's really important. And then that speaks for itself. But of course, then we do a lot of the typical things too. We have our newsletters that go out. We have our social medias, kind of your typical things. But really it's about the relationships for us.
Yeah, and I'd say more like home care, that is huge, right? Because there's a lot of trust there from case managers, from physicians, right, from nurses.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said there is so critical, because I do think that is that, like you said, we are in a very fractured healthcare system, and the doctor made the doctor or the case manager, they made a trust in you, right, to send you their patient, basically, right? So it's like their patient, they send them to you. But if we don't close that communication cycle with them and let them know, like, this was the outcome that we achieved, and we're used to sending like a discharge note or discharge report, but I think going beyond that and having a phone call or more of a formal letter or something like that, that's just really showing, hey, we value what you did for us to refer your patient to us, and this is really the outcome that we achieved for them. Goes a huge way in building that network, building those relationships, which is really a good foundation for marketing, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of noise for providers, and for referral sources. They get bombarded constantly. They're just as busy as everybody else. And so, to find a way to stand out is sometimes a challenge. But once you do, then they remember that. And it's just like, we've all heard, people remember how you make them feel. And if you make your provider feel like they can trust you and they can rely on you, then that relationship is a lot more solid, and it leads to more referrals.
Absolutely. So on your team, do you have people that go out and market to different groups or physicians? Just curious about how that works for you.
Yeah, we sometimes it's our therapists. We do a lot of free community service education things. Like we have something called a Bossy Bladder class, all about pelvic health. We do exercises you can do at home. We do cognitive training, we do balance tests with some of our PTs at some of our local hospitals. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I'll do some educational pieces. People on our admin staff will as well. And then if there's a community event or a fundraiser or something, then we gather the troops, so to speak, and go out there and do that. But we do, and then we do a lot of, dropping things off, setting up meetings. But yeah, our team does that.
Excellent. That's so critical. And you'd mentioned that you do like newsletters. Is that something that you do like every month, or what do you typically do there?
Typically every month we do one internal newsletter that just kind of helps support everybody that's at Covell, and then we do one community newsletter that's a little bit more broad.
Awesome. Yeah, for our audience out there, that's something that Krista does. It's something that we do at Practice Promotions, especially when you have, and I would suggest if you have multiple location practices out there where people are in their little, silo in their little office, right? They're not connected with the whole company. Having an internal newsletter or even a Facebook group can go a long way of just kind of seeing what's happening at other offices and make people aware, like, oh, there's a lot of fun stuff happening and progress being made in the company, and it just really binds them more to the company. So an internal newsletter is a great idea.
Yeah, Haley does that, and she does an amazing job. She's like the most organized person I know, so it's always looks just real nice and perfect and easy to read, so she does a great job.
Yeah, excellent. And so for your newsletter, is that just an email that goes out? What do you typically do there?
Yeah, it's an email.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and I would even go further, like what we've seen, especially if your audience is 40 plus, we're all used to going to the mailbox, right? The generation below that, they're more used to their phones, right? But everybody 40 plus is definitely used to reading and going to their mailbox. And so we've always seen direct mail work really well for newsletters, especially if you service a population that is 40 plus. It just, and mail works even better today than it used to, because everybody's, inundated with emails and social media, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great thing. And actually, Practice Promotions, we used to send, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were sending about 4 million direct mail pieces nationwide for clinics. Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
We still do quite a lot today. We just kind of shifted more digital, but the clinics that, again, we find that work really, really well are for the ones that do have that more senior population. They're so much used to reading still.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And so, staffing, we know that that's a nationwide issue, a whole North America, because Canada suffers too. But I'm just curious, what have you found to one, attract new OTs, PTs, speech therapists to you? And second, when we can talk about what are some things that you found to be beneficial for retention?
Sure. So first off, with recruitment, it's such a bear and it's our Achilles heel, and I know so many practice owners feel that same pain. For us, it varies. It really depends. It seems like on the season sometimes, like right now, we get a lot of traffic through LinkedIn, which sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Hmm.
A lot of the things that we used to do, like on Indeed or stuff like that, has not been as fruitful, and it used to be. Maybe it will be again. So we just try to cycle through our different platforms that we've tried to do. And then one of the really good things, though, that has proved fruitful is to speak at the state association conferences,
Hmm.
because again, that forms a relationship and then people remember whoever's speaking. And same with going to the universities and speaking, and then also taking fieldwork students. That seems to be fruitful often. I kind of look at it like a slow grow, because you go in and they're in their first year of school, but it's amazing how many people come back to us later and say, like, I remember you came to talk to my class. And I'm like, oh, perfect. So if we are consistent with it, then, there's a few therapists that seem to come to us every year from those types of platforms. So those are kind of more like time investments sometimes,
Hmm.
but I think that's helpful. Any event, like we have a knowledge exchange coming up, and I'll go speak at that with one of the professors. So those things really help. And I think when we can inspire therapists, and that's sometimes hard on social media and stuff too, because we are so inundated with everything, but that personal connection seems to help us a lot when we can do that. So those are probably the biggest things for us. And then, of course, word of mouth. If we have happy therapists and they have friends, we want to meet their friends.
Hmm. Yeah. So some golden nuggets there for sure. I think what you're doing is fantastic because you're treating recruiting and hiring as its own component, right? And especially as you scale, as you get to your size, like it's something that's needed all the time.
Right.
And for a lot of clinics that, especially ones that have been around a long time, like we had it pretty good, 10, 15, 20 years ago, because there was more surplus of therapists in the
Right.
market, right, to the demand. And now we're in a very different spot. So we have to look at recruiting and hiring from a networking, from a PR, from a marketing perspective, and what do we have constantly going on here, because it is a long game, right? And the worst place you can be in is when a therapist gives you 2 weeks notice and you haven't done anything to recruit, and now you're trying to recruit,
Right.
and that's going to take you 2, 3, 4 months sometimes to replace that person, and that's
Yeah,
going to
easy.
definitely impact the business big time, right? So yeah, I think that's really critical, like building your affiliates with schools, universities. What can you give back to the community there? I love what you're saying about speaking at associations, becoming very visible to people who are connected with those associations. And I think, like you said, it's a mixed bag with online
Yeah.
because it just depends on where people are at. And about 70, I think the stats are something like 76 to 78% of people are very passive. Right? So they're not actively looking for a job, but they could be a great fit for you.
Right.
So you have to have ways of reaching out to them, whether that's cold email or direct mail, or inviting them to. We used to do, like, at our practice, we'd invite people. Did a lot of CEUs at our practice that we would do. So sometimes I get like 50 therapists show up for
Yeah.
CEU courses, which is a great way of getting people in. So and then from an online perspective, you just have to be everywhere, right? Like you just have to be omnipresent because
Yeah.
people are just on all kinds of different channels. So if they see you on, Facebook, and then on their Instagram, and then they are casually looking on Indeed, they see your post up in there. They come back to your website. You have a recruiting center within your website. That gets them excited about what the potential is there. So that it's just a whole omnipresent channel that you have to be across online for sure.
It's funny you say that because I got an email just this week from OT who said she had spoken to Haley in our office at one point, and then she had heard about, I guess, me and some education things she took. Then she saw me on MedBridge and this and that. And then all of a sudden she said, and it's probably been a year and a half, I just now realized this is you're with Haley. And I'm like, yeah, but it took all these like different touch points for her to be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is all connected.
Yeah.
So those multiple places you show up, you think they don't matter, but they do.
Absolutely. I would say for, when we're thinking about attracting a new patient, right? New patient, they're going to have to see your information 7, 10, 12 times for them to think about, okay, I have to do something about this problem, right? I think when it comes to someone deciding to change their job, that's a heavy lift. And so that's
Right.
going to take much more in terms of repetition. And that's why it's a long game where you have to just be everywhere and you have to be constant. You have to be in their face. And then, like you said, it took a year, right, to connect the dots there for that person. So, what you did a year ago started to have an impact on that person. And that's just the recruiting game that we're in today. So that's why it has to become part of your overall strategy, part of your marketing arm is actually recruiting now.
Right. For sure.
And so retention wise, what have you seen working well for you at your practice?
A few different things. So we have done a couple different versions of like a mentoring program, and we did that actually where therapists would come in and for 5 months they would have a connection to me, or we've done it with other therapists that in their same discipline. That's been helpful to kind of brainstorm, stay on top of things, figure out pain points, and then build the connection. And then we do a couple of different things where we do intermittent sessions. One of them we call Covell Conversations, but like for example, we just had our last one where we talked about really challenging diagnoses like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, stiff person syndrome, and we met for 8 weeks, every other week for an hour. And then everybody that wanted to do it, I just asked that they would at least attend 3 out of 4 of the sessions. And they're virtual, so we can be spread out all over. But that was very inspiring, even for me. I walked away with tons of ideas for treatment that I hadn't thought of. And it really created this where we could kind of like geek out just as clinicians and connect. And then it really helped relationship building as well. And then we do a community event called Clinicians and Comrades where we meet every other month online, and in between we do in person in Northern Colorado. And we bring in a speaker usually from outside. This month, because it's OT month, we had Empowered Path OT. She specializes in pain come in, and we could come in and then anybody can come. And so that helps one with recruitment, but also retention. It's just great to see each other. And then we do like, our Christmas parties and things like that. But we just try to give people opportunities to come together. Like today, one of our PTs is going to teach some of us how to play pickleball. So that's part of our retention. And that was her idea. So I'm like, yep, we'll be there. So fun things like that. And just remembering the human side of it all and not always talking about like, okay, you really messed up your documentation again. We have to like get this to be a place where people can grow and feel supported. So it just depends on what's going on and what we feel like the business needs. And then we talk about it a lot, like what do people need? And then we'll ask them, even if we send out an anonymous survey, like what's going well, what's not, that gives us, instead of just guessing what our therapist needs, what do they need? What are they saying they need? And we try to respond to that.
Yeah, I love that. You gotta figure out what's working for people, right? And what they do, what, like you said, what do they need? And then you can tailor all kinds of stuff to that. And I do think that in order to scale a business, it's about your team, right? And you have to invest in your team and their growth, both professionally, but then also there's an intentionality to getting together, right? There's an intentionality of doing some fun things together as a team for team building. So sometimes, it can be like we're busy in our own world just trying to solve business problems, but then we need to put some attention on that too. So I love that you do that. So just kind of wrapping up here, if you were consulting another practice that is considering adding mobile therapy to their clinic, what would you have them think about first?
Well, one thing I would encourage owners or managers is to not think of it like just an add-on. It has to really be its own thing. Otherwise, it's not going to work because your main focus is going to be your, say, outpatient practice. And if the wheels are falling off there, of course you're going to tend to that. But then it's really easy for that mobile practice piece just to lose oxygen, and it sort of wastes away. And I've seen that happen a lot with traditional home care. When they add mobile outpatient, we see the mobile outpatient fizzle out over time because the home care is still their bread and butter. So that gets all their attention. So I would look at it as like we're developing another business, even if it's all under the same umbrella, and treat it the same because it's different marketing, different goals, different pain points, different successes. So I think that would be my number one thing is if you're going to do it, really look at it from the ground up the same way that you did with your outpatient or home care or whatever type of practice that you have.
Excellent advice. And so I'm just curious for you, Krista, what do you see is Covell Care's big goals here for 2026 and beyond?
I really hope one day that we can say that we have locked in on like the gold standard of mobile outpatient practice, because it really is still such a new area of care that even though it's been around a long time, it's very misunderstood. Not all communities have it, and we should. And so I want there to be a model that people can trust and understand of what mobile outpatient should be and also what it isn't. So my goal, my pie in the sky is just to really have that gold standard of what really good quality mobile outpatient therapy means, because it isn't just therapy at home. It's therapy at your job. It's therapy at the pool. It's therapy walking down the street to your community center. And so just to really elevate the level of what community service in mobile outpatient is. So that's kind of mine, and to step in that leadership role and then help other people understand it as clinicians, whether they work in mobile outpatient or not. So, we have some really wonderful relationships with home care therapists that, they have us like on speed dial, like, what's your wait list? Because get this patient on because I've got 5 visits and then they're coming to you. Yeah. So, we really want people to have more support so they don't fall through the cracks.
Absolutely. I love that. So congratulations on all your success, and I love the big goals that you have, Krista. If our audience would love to learn more about you, connect with you, what's a great way for them to do that?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. So LinkedIn, Instagram, you can just search me by my name. It's Krista with a K, Covell Pearson. You can look at our website, which is covellcare.com. But yeah, I'd love to connect. Just shoot me a message, an email. Basically, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn's probably the best way.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Krista, thank you so much for being on the Practice Marketing Podcast with us here today. So much great advice there in terms of mobile therapy and just great business advice. Congratulations on your success. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
All right, awesome. And to our audience out there, thank you so much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of today's podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe us on the Practice Marketing Podcast and also on our YouTube channel where we have all these podcasts in video form. And don't forget to go to practicepromotions.net. We got tons of marketing advice for you on there to move your clinic forward. So this is Neil Trickett with the Practice Marketing Podcast, wishing you much success in your practice.
A free way for you to support our show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's a chance for you to tell us what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it as well. Just scroll down to ratings and review on your phone and click write a review. Thanks.